This article that BBC did on Cuban and American diplomacy mainly focuses on the one prisoner, Alan Gross. BBC takes more of an individualistic approach when focusing mainly on the prisoner. As you can see, both pictures exemplify him as happy, which gives off an overall positive viewpoint of the situation. Compared to BBC, the New York Times takes a more state-based approach as they're portraying a picture of a Cuban family watching Castro give a speech on American and Cuban diplomacy. So compared to BBC and New York Times, USA Today gives off more of a realist approach when analyzing just the protesters. So, with the shootings that recently happened in Sydney, Australia, Daily News mainly focuses on the victims of the story, more or less not the killer and what actually happened. This really gives off more of a humanistic approach, just mainly focusing on all the victims with all the pictures they have of the people that were killed. NBC News really gives off the more serious approach of the story, focusing mainly on just how the police were trying to free these victims and what was going on. It's really a more conservative approach when looking at just the empathy, the lack of empathy of that this picture is really showing. So compared to NBC and the Daily Mail, BBC is really more showing the emotional side of the story by capturing a person being rushed into the hospital. This picture is a more liberal approach, seeing how empathetic the story is and how much you feel for what is going on in Australia. So, these next few stories are about how women can now join the military in Britain, and RT News really takes more of a structural side, showing the really more conservative aspect of joining the military, portraying how structural everything is. BBC also follows this, showing a guy in the military active and what his duties are, and kind of portraying the difficulty of women kind of adapting to that and not really being open minded to the whole idea itself. So compared to RT and BBC, Yahoo really gives off a more liberal approach with this, portraying a woman next to an Air Force sign, which really shows the different aspect of how some people are for women joining the military and some people aren't. And I really think it's really interesting how two very kind of conservative newspapers really show it more as structural, and then Yahoo News really shows it as more of like a liberal, and they kind of are more open to it. So, New York Times covers the story of 8 children being killed in Australia, and they really take more of a conservative approach, kind of just showing an overall picture of the crime scene and what is going on, but there isn't really any emotional ties to it. So, USA Today really does focus on more of the emotion. BBC News also does take a more individualistic. So USA Today covers a story on how the Taliban basically killed a number of people during a school shooting, and this really shows a more state-based approach, viewing how the citizens are praying against the Taliban for peace and justice. So BBC News Asia does take more of a humanistic approach when analyzing this situation when they use a picture of a guy holding a child that was hurt in the massacre. This really shows how tragic the situation is, and it really exemplifies how Pakistan is really trying to fight against the Taliban. So Al Jazeera News gives off a really different approach when they depict a picture of someone from the Taliban who took part in the shooting that happened in Pakistan. It really shows the different conflict that is going on and how state-based everything really is, and showing this totally different side of the story.